So I'm just going to advise anyone in the public gallery that they're welcome to use their mobile phones as long as they are in airplane mode and that all devices should be muted. It's not permissible to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. Please note that this meeting is being recorded but not streamed as there are no evidence sessions. So just going to ask, are there members aware of any apologies? None to record from the clerk's perspective at this stage? No? Okay. And nobody will be attending via Zoom because we're not streaming. Don't have the facility. I'd remind you of your responsibility, members, to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today. Do any members have any matters that they want to declare?
Just the usual, executor and or owner of a small farm.
Okay.
The same here, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Chair's business then. Item number 1, members will be aware of the publication of the Environmental Governance Report on Tuesday. The report makes a number of recommendations, including DAERA to publish a map of environmental governance, identifying who is responsible for what and signposting to key points of contact to enhance accountability. All public authorities in Northern Ireland to have a duty to cooperate with the environmental regulator to reflect their environmental responsibilities and facilitate the exchange of information, and the regulator to make greater use of existing civil sanctions and to adopt new civil sanctions for other environmental areas to broaden the toolkit available to support compliance and enforcement. I would hope that there will be more coverage of this in the Chamber. I have asked committee staff to make room after recess for a discussion on this, members, if you're content. Do any members want to make any comments now, or are you happy to wait until we have space in the meeting following recess? Thank you, members. Item number 2 then, in respect of our deliberations on the dilapidation bill, as the citizen space call for evidence is now closed, are members content for the committee to continue accepting written briefings from stakeholders until the Christmas recess, at which point the position will then be reviewed? Members content?
Yeah.
Thank you, members. Agenda item 4. As the minutes of the meeting on the 16th of October refers to the draft minutes for a meeting dated the 16th of October, starting on page 7 of your pack. Members, have you any comments? Are you content with the minutes as drafted? And if so, I'll go and assign them, and these will then be published on the website.
Okay.
Thank you, members. Just here. Agenda item 5, matters arising. I have a couple. So item number 1, referred to page 17 to 19 of the pack for correspondence from the department dated the 16th of October regarding the confirmed occurrence of Asian hornet in Northern Ireland. Members, as you recall, at our meeting last week we received confirmation that the first Asian hornet in Northern Ireland was detected in Dundonald on the 10th of October, and we then requested a written update. Since then, a nest has been discovered and the story continues to develop. The Asian hornet is listed as a species of union concern under EU regulation 1143/2014, which is listed under Annex 2 of the Windsor Framework, meaning that there is an obligation to prevent introduction and spread and detection and eradicate new occurrences, as well as raise awareness of the issue. Members, the Department advises that NIEA commenced a monitoring programme involving live capture traps and visual survey of the area. NIEA is working in collaboration with the Irish National Parks and Wildlife Service and the National Biodiversity Data Centre through the Shared Island Biosecurity and Invasive Species Initiative, and that's to coordinate a joined-up response to the Asian hornet as well as other non-native invasive species. So, members, do you have any comment you can tend to note? And we will be expecting further updates from DAERA in due course. Go ahead.
Yeah, obviously the Minister was questioned about this in the House earlier in the week, but I'm just not entirely clear from the answers that he gave about what actions or plan he's going to put in place and what the cost of that response will be. No,
I think you're right. There were some good questions in it, and I think the response to date hasn't been utterly satisfactory. The funny thing is about the Asian hornet, people have been warning about it for, I don't know if you've been getting correspondence, I'd certainly been getting messages from people in that space, certainly concerned in the build-up to it blinking arriving. It's almost as if it was almost inevitable. Mm-hmm. But as you would say, the sting hasn't went out of the story yet. So,
and has there been any detection of the Asian hornet in the south of the island? There has.
Yes, in Cork.
Cork.
Mm-hmm. That's the only one I'm aware of at the minute, Chair. But I think there was 2 instances, perhaps in Cork during the summer, from memory.
Okay. It's just in terms of monitoring one.
Okay.
There isn't any clarity as to how it arrived here either yet. Sure, there isn't, so we haven't got that amount of detail.
Yeah, I think we could press for maybe something in regard to just an update in terms of their investigations as to how it arrived. I think if my memory serves me right, the Minister outlined a number of ways it could have arrived, but obviously DAERA do have a role to play in terms of those balances and checks at the in terms of food and whatever it is that
And I suppose that there's also a misconception that perhaps, if we had a harsh winter, that might finish them off, but seemingly that hasn't been the case so far. They've survived a UK winter, so maybe we are a little bit mild too.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think there is another piece for the department there in terms of the raising the awareness, that public awareness, because it occurred to me, obviously at Neston and Donald, one in Cork, they won't be the only instances that we have here, and certainly from the B fraternity, it is a significant fear that they have. So, have you enough there, Clerk, in terms of a number of points for the department,
Yes.
in terms of an update, in terms of investigating how the route of arrival, the actions taken so far, and actually the public awareness campaign about sightings, detection and reporting, because that will be really important to the investigation. Members content? Wow.
There is an app, but I'm not sure how widely known that there is an app that can be used for detection.
Wow. Is it,
Asian Hornet Watch app.
Wow. It does look quite lethal, to be fair.
Well done for the member of the public, though, who was able to spot it.
Oh, totally. Agreed.
Chair, can I just observe that we have a written update dated the 16th of October, and the department are aware that from our perspective this is a sort of a continuing story and so on. So can I just clarify, do we want to seek answers to those questions now, or do we want to wait, or do we want the department to feed into us as and when
I think we'll
developments occur from their point of view?
I think we can ask them just even in terms of registering their interest in it too. I think the public awareness piece is really important actually, in terms of raising ensuring just that the department, as obviously they've got a difficulty in identifying the root source, but also the evidence, the public awareness, because I'm not sure that there is a high level of public awareness in terms of identification and reporting of it.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members. Okay, item number 2 then. Refer to page 20 to 21 of the pact. Correspondence from the Native Irish Bee Society dated the 17th of October regarding the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, updating of the status of Ireland's only native honeybee, the wild eastern honeybee. I'm not going to try that. There's a bit of Latin or something in there. Also known as the black bee, it's easier to say. It's endangered within the European Union. This is particularly concerning given the Asian hornet sightings, as they pose a significant threat to the honeybee and other pollinators in the UK. So local beekeepers have been advised to closely monitor their hives and report any sightings to DAERA. So as we've picked up in the correspondence to DAERA, I think the questions that have been asked are certainly reasonable, and we'll work with the department in that space, guys. Item number 3, refer to pages 22 to 23 of the pack for response from the department dated the 16th of October in reply to our letter regarding opportunities from the Shared Island Fund to develop the aquaculture sector. So on the 2nd of October we considered the raised supplementary briefing note on aquaculture, providing a response to questions arising from its presentation on the 11th of September, providing an overview of aquaculture across the UK and Ireland. We agreed to write to the department to seek further details regarding Shared Ireland funding in terms of what it could mean for growth and further development of aquaculture in Ireland. The response highlights that the all-island marine bio-waste refineries for circular blue bioeconomy, the collaborative project of which Rathlin Island is one of 3 sites, is converting untapped resources from aquaculture into high-value ingredients for a wide variety of industries. The project aims to accelerate transition to sustainable marine bio-based production systems, and projects like this will identify opportunities for growth and further development of aquaculture in Northern Ireland. The department also states it will keep the aquaculture representative group informed of any future opportunities that are available through Shared Island funding. So members content to note, or any comments on that? Thank you, members. Item number 4, referring to page 26 to 28 of the pack for response from the department dated the 16th of October in reply to our letter of the 3rd of October regarding the farm sustainability regulations, and we're going to consider the SR later in this meeting. Members, as you will recall, as part of our scrutiny, requested that the department provide details of cross-compliance penalties within the last 5 years, and the department has now provided figures for the period 2020 to 2024. I think William was the members inquisitive, particularly in regard to that. In response to our query of how many times in total that the maximum penalty issued and how many individual farmers, the department has highlighted that 48 individual businesses have breached across the 5 years, and of those some appeared more than once in the figures that have been provided. In response to our query of how many repeat breaches would an individual farmer have carried out before the maximum penalty was issued, the department states a cross-compliance breach can attract a penalty of 100% after only one repetition of the same requirement if the extent, severity permanence and intent assessed by the inspector is such that this level of penalty is deemed appropriate. The department points out that this differs from the proposed farm sustainability penalty matrix, where a penalty of 100% will only be applied when the penalty is determined to be either high impact, third repeat, which is the fourth instance, or very high impact, second repeat, third instance, and subsequent repetition at very high impact. And that's obviously bears some relevance to the matrix that they had provided and you guys have seen. So in response to our query of total penalties were issued, how many were to the same individual and were repeat breaches, the department has provided a table breaking down these figures over the period in questions. So have members any comments to the responses at this stage? You certainly pick it up in any debate later on, if that's okay. Okay, item number 5, I referred to pages 31 to 32 for response from the department dated the 16th of October regarding our query in relation to our scrutiny of the Waste and Resources Common Framework. As you recall, we were briefed on the framework at our meeting on the 25th of September and agreed that we had completed our scrutiny and would subsequently engage with the formal review in due course. In response to our query, there will be a public consultation as part of the review, or that will be an internal process, or will it be an internal process? The department states that the review process is currently under review and a recommendation is being considered that the review process for all the common frameworks will be a single annual reporting and review cycle. So furthermore, although reviews of the Waste and Common Resources Common Framework may involve targeted stakeholders for transparency, a full public consultation is considered unlikely. In response to the query regarding the tonnage of exported waste that goes for incineration abroad, figures supplied show that there has been an increase from 188 and 194 tonnes in 2021, 188,194 tonnes in 2021 to 288,766 tonnes in 2024, which is an increase of over 100,000 tonnes, which is quite significant. Any comments, or are you content to note the response? Okay, members. Okay, item number 6, refer you to table papers at pages 3 to 5 for a clerk's memo which outlines key aspects and scrutiny we have undertaken regarding clause 16 of the Administrative and Financial Provisions Bill. As you are aware, clause 16 is specific to this committee, and as such we were requested to undertake scrutiny and report our finding back to the Finance Committee by the 30th of October. Clause 16 will provide the Department with an enabling power to amend aspects of the Marine and Coastal Access Act 2009, providing DERA with the greater powers to charge fees for marine licensing activities and services that it currently provides without a fee. Members, you will recall we were briefed on the Department's response to the public consultation on the 28th of November 2024 and then considered a written briefing on that clause and the clauses that were being proposed for the bill at our meeting on the 3rd of April. We were then briefed by officials at our meeting on the 9th of October when we also heard views from the Marine Task Force. Following the briefing, we had a question and answer session during which members raised no specific concerns. If members are content, I would propose that we respond to the Clerk to the Committee for Finance advising that we are content with the content and ambition of Clause 16 Administrative and Financial Provisions Bill. Are members content with that? Yeah, thank you, members. Okay, agenda item 6 is the Departmental Oral Briefing on Wildfires in the Northern Ireland Strategic Framework 2025-2030. Members, I now refer to the pack starting at page 34 for the briefing paper on the framework, which provides a roadmap over the next 5 years to coordinate the future wildfire efforts for all stakeholders, focused around objectives of prevention, preparedness, response, recovery and enforcement. A copy of the framework starts at page 39 of the pack, and I welcome the following officials from the Natural Environment Division to the meeting and invite them to provide as evidence to the committee and answer any questions. So we have Mark Hammond, the Head of Natural Environment Operations. Mark, welcome, and we look forward to your briefing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, wildfires are a risk here, elsewhere in these islands and across the UK. It's a truly cross-departmental and stakeholder issue. So, a collaborative and collective approach is needed to solve this problem. So, I'm happy to be able to give you a briefing on Wildfires in Northern Ireland Strategic Framework 2025 to 2030. So I think it would be useful, just as the starter, to give you a bit of a brief history and background to how we've got to this point. So in terms of wildfires, the first major work in Northern Ireland wildfires happened after the wildfires in April and May in 2011. Now, after those significant fires, there was quite a bit of correspondence between different departments trying to figure out who's responsible for this issue. So there would have been correspondence to Department of Health It's a fire service issue because they put the fires out. There would have been correspondence to Department of Environment. It's an environmental issue. Your wildlife is being damaged. There would have been correspondence to Department of Agriculture at the time saying, well, you're influencing land management practices, so it's your responsibility. So there was quite a lot of to and froing between departments, and it was decided that an interdepartmental group would be established at that point to make some recommendations to help address the issue. So they made 8 recommendations in January 2012, and by around 2014-15, a lot of those recommendations were largely implemented. Some of the key actions, for example, were the Eastern Mournes Wildfire Project and a series of awareness initiatives in particular hotspots, such as in the Belfast Hills. So part of that also had the development of it was meant to be a wildfire forum, but it was never established. Instead, a stakeholder group was established. But by around that time, some of the recommendations had been implemented, some of them hadn't really progressed, and the stakeholder group, whenever it was meeting, it actually didn't have any real direction to go forward with, and that was one of the key messages of the group. It just turned out, ended up being an update group. Everyone was updating, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. There wasn't a cohesive direction. It was the key message from it. So as a consequence of that, we really had to go back to the drawing board. So whenever we went back to the drawing board, we had to look at what went wrong. One of the things that went wrong was that group was just a task and finish group. We're here to make recommendations, and then that group folded. There wasn't any real governance around the recommendations, reviewing it, monitoring it, next steps, etc. There was no ownership for some of the actions. There was no forum established, and as a consequence of that, there was a lot of drift in the actions that were happening. And again, no long-term strategic direction. So some of the key agencies, Northern Ireland Environment Agency and the Fire Service, they got together and started to renew their partnership, which required dedicated staff time. And as a consequence of that, we started to do shared training, joint attendance at incidents, sharing resources and sharing knowledge. So that started to increase the understanding of what everyone's roles, responsibilities and concerns were around the wildfire issue. That actually started, that was the precursor for the sort of interagency working at wildfire events. But one of the other key things that we thought was the strategic direction was required. So we developed a joint vision, and as part of that we established a strategic wildfires group of key government departments and agencies in March 21. And the purpose of that group was to develop a co-designed strategic way forward in relation to wildfires. As part of that, we also established a wildfire forum of key stakeholders and landowners and land managers at that time in January 22, and that was to help influence this strategic way forward and inform it. So there was a series of strategic group meetings, multilateral workshops and engagement with the forum to agree a shared set of goals, themes and recommendations for action. So the forum itself included key landowners, agricultural unions, environmental stakeholders, the Met Office, anyone that we thought was involved in the wildfire issue. And then we gained ministerial approval to consult the public about these recommendations for action. And then, of course, it was a period of assessing the public consultation and redrafting to develop the strategic framework. So the usefulness of that work actually showed some of the key points that came out that we hadn't picked up ourselves was throughout the forum and the public consultation required a greater emphasis on recovery, greater emphasis on evidence. And one of the things that we hadn't actually picked up in the initial public consultation was the health issue, to actually get more information and awareness out there about the health impacts of wildfires. So that's now included in the framework. Another key factor in the consultation was that we got about 50 responses, but many of those responses were actually from experts across the world. So we had responses from America, Australia, across Europe. And one of the things we had to factor into account into the framework was what was called, there's a conundrum in the wildfire work called the wildfire paradox, which actually means that initially our focus might have been on let's stop fires, let's just stop the fires. But the wildfire paradox means that if we're completely successful at stopping fires, we're just building up a bigger problem if there is a fire. So if you were successful in stopping all fires for 7 years, you've just actually built up the problem if you don't address other issues. So if there is a fire, it'll be more severe and could be larger, usually related to a build-up of vegetation, etc. So that had to be built in to the objectives of the framework. So it's not only about trying to reduce the number of fires, but also trying to reduce the severity of fires if they do happen. So the framework itself, it gained executive approval on the 4th of September and was launched on the 8th of October. It's got a vision to create a wildfire-resistant Northern Ireland where communities, agencies, landowners work collaboratively to reduce the severity and number of wildfires, protect life and the environment and respond effectively to wildfire incidents. It's bound by strict 5 strategic objectives related to prevention, preparedness, response, recovery and enforcement. But alongside that, we also have included actions and areas for development in relation to governance, funding and resources. So the governance was seen as key, so we've set up a governance structure of an interdepartmental and agency strategic wildfire group who will have responsibility for developing an associated action plan and for reviewing and monitoring the plan. A wildfire stakeholders forum of key actors to inform the action plan and to help deliver a number of the actions, and also local wildfire groups and stakeholders to implement actions on the ground. So there'll be close key collaboration between all of these groups. So that is in terms of governance, and one of the key next steps will be the action plan. In terms of prevention, it's sort of split up into a number of different themes. Theme 1 would be education, engagement and awareness, to develop greater awareness and to educate the communities and landowners. Then regulation, to review current policies, procedures, legislation in relation to wildfires, to see if there's any improvements can be made there. And then another theme of land management, we'll be looking at developing specific management plans for high-risk areas and ensuring there's appropriate advice about how land management should be undertaken to reduce the likelihood and impact of wildfires. There's then also evidence, so it's background evidence needs in relation to collating evidence to inform future actions in relation to wildfire risk profiles and wildfire incidents that occur, where they occur, how big they are, etc. So then the next objective would be preparedness, and that is preparing for pre-fires to make sure we're in a good position. So it would be reviewing community-based preparedness schemes, reviewing options around monitoring, sensing and watch schemes for high-risk areas, and also looking at the wildfire alert system that's operated so that people are aware of when high-risk periods will take place, so that they can put measures in place to be alert and vigilant. There's also then preparing response plans so that if fires do happen for certain areas, whenever the emergency services go in, they know what access points are, they know where water points are, they know who the contacts are, if gates need to be opened. So those are response plans for high-risk areas. And also looking at assets, what assets are available for wildfire incidents, and reviewing whether additional specialist equipment is needed. In terms of response, it is making sure that we have, if needs be, public health messaging available if there is prolonged wildfire events that are risk to the public, and continued the multi-agency and stakeholder response to wildfire incidents. Also development of early alert systems and reviewing the tactical response capability within Northern Ireland. But then in terms of recovery, if there is any fires, establishing procedures to assess the impact and to put in measures to help recovery both of habitats and communities if they are impacted. And then in terms of enforcement, a key area is that undertaking a review of current legislation and increasing the capacity to invest wildfire investigations if fires do happen, to try and get successful prosecutions for people who start fires illegally. And then lastly, we have a measure for funding for development, which is about identifying funding opportunities to support the management of wildfire risk in Northern Ireland. So those are the areas that we've identified require further development. So the next stage is to then develop an action plan to put these into motion, to identify responsible owners and timelines and resources required for them. So in terms of that, we've already contacted the key stakeholders just to sort of see what actions are being taken at the minute, because we haven't been standing still. There have been ongoing initiatives in relation to wildfire. So we're getting those responses hopefully within a couple of weeks. We'll take them. We shall then be able to see what work is being already implemented on the ground. We'll be able to see how they fit in with the areas for development, identify any gaps and make sure that those gaps are filled. So as part of that, we'll be having a series of strategic group meetings. We'll be engaging with the forum and all stakeholders within it. As part of that, we'll be undertaking multilateral workshops, and from that we will get an agreed set of actions over the next 5 years, and a draft action plan should be in place by the 31st of March 2025. So
2026.
2026, yeah. It was actually a presentation to give, and I noticed whenever I put the presentation up, yeah, I still got 2025 written on it, so 2026. Thank you. The publication of this strategic framework will enable the development of this focused and detailed wildfire action plan. The action plan, as I say, will be co-designed to ensure delivery and implementation of the strategic objectives and key areas of development. We're happy to see the local enthusiasm that's been shown by stakeholders to get involved with this and to come up with potential actions, which is good to see. And we're keen for all stakeholders to come together to engage in this process to design and implement the action plan to make our communities more resilient to wildfires, making them aware of dangers wildfires pose to health, and providing them with tools to adapt to and mitigate wildfire risk through prevention, preparedness and vigilance. So I think one of the key messages is that we have to do this collectively. It's an important first step, but we all have to work together across departments, across agencies, across stakeholders to try and really work together to reduce the number and severity of wildfires through collective action. Lastly, as a message, I'd like to reiterate calls for the public to report any information they have about wildfires, about who started them, etc., because we think that's a key area that we could work on to try and improve enforcement of wildfire incidents that occur. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark. I should have declared an interest in this one, shouldn't I? In 2011, which this refers back to, when the Minister at DOE then initiated this piece of work, I was up the morns at probably one of the most significant events, if you like. So it's both welcome but shocking for me that 2011 to 2026, which is 15 years, and we've now got a framework. In that, why has it taken so long for us even to get to the framework, which doesn't actually deliver the plan, if you know what I mean? Is there any rationale behind that?
Well, I think it is, as I say, there was initial recommendations put in place. There wasn't a clear ownership of the recommendations for taking it forward. So it actually took sort of individuals and champions within each individual organisation to actually say, we'll take initial responsibility to this for getting a collective approach designed. So that was the Environment Agency and Fire Service, but initially we had to work together, and we worked together collectively in relation to those attending incidents, understanding what the issue was, understanding what each other's problems were, how each other worked. And we did start to then work collectively in terms of education, awareness and incidents. But then through that process, we still realised that it can't be just for the Environment Agency and the Fire Service to try and sort this problem out. So then collectively within the Fire Service and the agency, we decided, right, we have to try and get a strategic approach developed. So that's whenever the strategic wildfire group was initiated in 2021. And through that, then we started to develop partnerships and working with others collectively to design the framework. We also then recognised that we had to get landowners and stakeholders involved at the key point in time. So we had to involve them in developing the framework. And then again, it was a process of public consultation and review. So yes, it was a long period of time, but I think what we have now got is a very robust framework. We've got the governance in place to move it forward, and we've got hopefully the buy-in and acceptance from the stakeholders and landowners who've been involved with it to get involved with it. So I think we're at a good stage now, and whenever we look collectively across others in UK, Ireland and Europe, we're actually quite quite ahead of the game in relation to how some of them are reacting and adapting to the wildfire issue. We're the first probably in Europe to adopt the multi-agency approach to wildfire incidents. We've had our officials have been over at Holland, etc., over at Portugal, actually explaining to them how we have developed that approach, because they see that as the multi-working together approach as a key approach that is missing in some other jurisdictions in Europe and across the agencies. So it's taken a while, acknowledged, but I think the process that we've used has put us in quite a firm place and has cemented those relationships that are required to really make actions meaningful.
Okay. There's a piece that jumped out at me in terms of your presentation, because I understand the aspect of the controlled and planned burning that might be required to manage land. In terms of the controlled and planned burning that needs to be part of the action plan, then who would own the risk that's associated with that? So what we're speaking about there is permitted burning for the purposes of controlling vegetation and stuff. Is the agency readily identifiable who will permit that and manage it and then inspect it?
Yeah, so that's a legislative issue. At the minute, the burning is allowed under the Game Preservation Act, so you are allowed to burn vegetation between certain dates. But Minister Muir has asked us to undertake a public consultation to review those burning dates, and part of that review will have to look at things like the consenting process. At the minute, there isn't a consenting process. There is a notification process that you have to notify if you're going to burn a fire within a certain distance of a forest, but there isn't really any notifications or licensing requirement to burn. At the minute, it's really driven by best practice. So the key thing that we and the fire service would be trying to allow to people is, how do you undertake, if you're undertaking a controlled burn at the minute, how do you do it? Because essentially, if you're undertaking a prescribed controlled burn, it shouldn't get out of control and there shouldn't be a wildfire.
No, I totally agree. I think there's a significant piece of work in the education space there about even the value of a fire break, which is, I think you understand that, you've probably seen that, where you create a fire break first before you would embark on that. And the other piece that jumps out at me is, again, the fire triangle is very simple: fuel, oxygen, and an ignition source. And the ignition source is always going to be human, unless it's an accident. In that regard, has there been any? I didn't pick it up in terms of the presentation or the framework in terms of the criminal aspect of it. So whether that's a malicious one, or whether it is an overambitious aspect of even trying to control something. So the malicious stuff really is, I think, where a lot of it is actually comes from.
Yes, and would agree with that. A lot of them are deliberately set. So part of the areas for development is the legislation around it. There is a lot of separate pieces of legislation that relate to burning. So it would be a review of that to see if the legislation needs to be improved. One of the other things is looking at the capability and capacity to undertake wildfire investigations. We've learned from experience that it's one of the investigations that's difficult. You almost have to identify someone when doing it and getting the evidence for it. So it is a difficult thing to investigate. And we found that in terms of investigating the fire spread and where the fire started, etc. You do need a degree of expertise to do that. For a couple of past incidents, we actually had to involve the Dutch police and fire services for them to come over and give us the services so they can trace from a big fire. They can actually use their expertise to trace where it started and identify how it started. Can't identify who did it, but they can identify specifically the point that the fire started and give evidence about how it started. So we have to look at our capability and capacity to be able to do that. And certainly I think one of the key things probably is, Minister Muir has said it quite a lot, is for the public, we suspect that the members of the public probably know who might be involved in some of this, but to date we haven't really been given any evidence or information about who might be doing it or even why they're doing it. So you know, one of the key things is for the public to sort of say, this, what's happening isn't acceptable. And if you do have information about people, do let authorities know about it, both in terms of trying to figure out, understanding why they're actually doing it, which will then help inform future actions, but also to get successful prosecutions because it's publicly unacceptable.
I could keep here all day, 'cause I could just pick at this all day. It really interests me. But I'm going to go to the committee's
Thank you,
declaration.
Chair. Again, it's a topic also a very strong interest in, because I live in an area which, my locality, we suffer a lot of fires, a lot of bogs around where we are, and the heather catches fire. And I suppose what I want to pick up on is to underline the importance of the strategy working with local communities and landowners, and you know, because I know there, like during the lockdown of COVID at the beginning, we had a severe fire in the Murrins down our way, and I know that like the local community group, which I'm a part of, we help sort of move people on to let the fire service do their work effectively. And I know that farmers mobilised with their tankers and fill them with water to help on the edges of the fires as well. So I just would sort of emphasise the importance of, as part of your reaction plan, to make sure that local, like, there's lots of community organisations there who know their territory and know the people really, really well in those areas, who can actually assist the fire service do their job. And the same thing with farmers and landowners. You know, they know lanes and boherines and cow tracks that you wouldn't otherwise know, and they could be a major benefit of helping get to the responding to the fire. So have you factored, for example, I'm going with the community, you know, working with the community sector to try and help mobilise them as well, you know, in the event of a fire?
Yeah, so one of the key areas of development is that community engagement, both for education and awareness, but also in terms of response. It's that idea of an asset register, knowing who has assets that can assist if there is an incident. Combined with that, the response plans. So the response plans are designed for a specific location to inform the fire service as soon as they get their response plan about the things like that laneway can take this type of vehicle. There isn't a turning point. There is a turning point. Who, if there's a gate there, who the landowner is for the gate if it needs opened. So those are the type of things we would hope would come out in the response plans, and yeah, it's the local community are key to help inform that, but also key in terms of vigilance, because they're probably going to be the ones who are likely to spot a fire early first and report it. So no, it is the community is definitely well built into the framework and will be built into the actions, because yeah, they're essential to make this work.
And thank you, Chair. The other thing I want to mention as well is the issue of grazing and keeping the land in good condition. Because I note that, see, in the new criteria for the new single farm payment, or farm sustainability payment that's coming out, farmers will be disincentivised effectively to top brushes. You know, under the old regime, in order to qualify for the single farm payment, you would have them to, for example, top brushes, but that will no longer be a requirement going forward. And that's, I actually welcome that, because we know from our trip up to the Caffrey farm, the importance of having habitat for ground nesting birds, for example. But is there additional challenge there in very warm conditions, which we do experience now because of climate change, that if land isn't managed by topping and mowing and is let sort of grow, is there no danger that there becomes an additional source of tinder that could cause wildfires?
Yeah. So yeah, and so that's one of the areas that a balance is required whenever plans are being developed for wildfire management plans. So in terms of those plans, you're trying to balance the environment that's there in relation to the measures you put in to try and prevent the wildfires. You're balancing it against the risk of the wildfire. So that is something that is thought of and considered whenever the management plans are being developed. So a good example would be actually in that Eastern Mourne project, they'd identified a number of key pressure points where the vegetation is sort of kept low, because if a fire is reaching there, it's kept low so that then it slows the fire down and gives the fire services a chance to get there and attack the fires. Now, there was about 6 or 7 points there that are managed. One of the points, whenever it was identified, actually says that point actually has quite a unique habitat that isn't found elsewhere. So that's the only area that isn't managed that was identified as, well, that's an area we'll have to accept the risk because that habitat, you can't damage it. So it is one of the considerations during management planning. One of the other key aspects would be the encouragement of peatland restoration, because what we'd find is that if the peatland ecosystems are working well and the water table is at the right level, it actually changes the species composition to a composition of vegetation which is less vulnerable and less likely to burn as much. And also if the water table is kept high for the peatlands, it also reduces the likelihood of significant impacts if there is a fire. So it is a combination of trying to get the management of the vegetation right in the specific areas that it's suitable for. But I agree that grazing is a challenge, both in terms of areas that are overgrazed or undergrazed, or is a challenge to get the grazing right.
I think I'm funny, just on the last point then, I'm finished now, Chair, and you could answer this. I've noticed there from bog fires that we will have in our locality, the diversity of the biodiversity does not seem to have come back at all. You see shoots of grass, for example, but you don't have that biodiversity. How long will it take for the full biodiversity to be restored following a serious wildfire?
Yeah. So on a serious wildfire, where it's sort of burnt in and destroyed the seed bank, it's decades. Under those type of fires, often you get a lich and algal crust can form over the surface, which actually makes it very hard for seeds to generate. And because seeds are hard to generate on it, you start to get erosion, etc. So it can take decades to actually get any form of vegetation on those really deep burnt areas. If it's a surface burn, the vegetation should recover quite quickly. There's usually a flush of grasses. The grasses are the first to flush, but the heather, etc., should all come up. If it's a quick surface burn, which is what people try to do for a prescribed burn, it's the difference between a prescribed burn. The quick burns are almost called a cool burn, where it's very quick and rapid. They can recover quite quickly, but the hot burns that dig into the ground, they're the ones that cause the most damage. So it depends what type of burn happens. The recovery can be very quick within a couple of years, but yeah, if it's bad, it'll be decades.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, Chair.
No problem. Thank you, Declan. And John, please.
Chair, I want to thank Mark for the presentation, but also the fact I think he's already answered the question. Declan mentioned there about community frameworks of engagement, and it's been covered already, except maybe just to point out, and the department will know this already, that local councils would have the names and contacts for local community groups. It might be worth tying in there if you wanted to establish a community framework. But no other question.
Thank you, John. And Anya?
Thank you, Chair. Just, I suppose, down in my own neck of the woods, we had serious wildfires on around the Sleek Bay area that obviously straddles Fermanagh, Tyrone and Monaghan, as well as the Culca mountain range, again on a cross-border basis between Fermanagh and Cavan. Just in relation to controlled burning, what is the, I suppose, first of all, the difference south to north in relation to that? And I suppose, has there been any joined up approach on how that's actually managed?
So in terms of controlled burning in the south and the north, the actual way to undertake a controlled burning is the same wherever you go to do it safely is the same. The difference is in the burning dates of when you can or can't burn. There is a difference between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland and Scotland and England and Wales. They're all different actual dates and how you control controlled burning. So that is one of the areas that Minister Muir's identified as asking for a public consultation to actually have a look at the controlled burning issue in terms of the dates, when should be the dates that allow burning, and also probably looking at the methodology. Does it need some form of notification or licensing, or how do you undertake it? At the minute, it's just got dates, and it's from the Game Preservation Act, which is quite an old act. So there is a difference between the two jurisdictions in that.
And just in terms of the dates, is there a big difference between the dates? And I suppose just even on your point around that's one out of my head, I suppose controlled burning itself, you know, looking at it, where you literally just step 2 or 3 feet, you're across the border, in either County Cavan or County Monaghan, where they could be burning, obviously doing a controlled burn, and then somebody in the north is not allowed to burn for, could be 3 months, could be 4 months, I don't know. You know better than me on that. And I suppose just a final point in terms of, in the north, obviously, I think you have to, well, you're encouraged to advise fire service.
Yes.
What's the equivalent in the south?
To be honest, I don't know what the equivalent in the south is. I do know that the difference in the burn period is about a month. But what we would have would have to ensure that we would engage with landowners about during the consultation, because one of the things that we hear from landowners is that although you might have a long burn period, when you can actually burn is quite short in terms of the weather availability. So it's that period of time is when landowners would probably prefer to burn, because the weather is drier. So the landowners themselves would probably prefer a longer period because it gives them more scope to do it. But it is balancing against that. That's the period where there's probably more risk of something spreading if it happens. But there will be a consultation to look at that. But again, one of the key things is that if it's a controlled burn, there actually shouldn't be a significant risk of a significant wildfire developing from it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from any of the other members? Mark, you're not late today. Thank you so much for your presentation and for coming to meet us today. It's really appreciated. Thank you. The members, the briefing paper stated that an action plan is in development and will be drafted by March 2026. Members content that we seek a briefing and opportunity to comment on the plan prior to sign off by the department? Yep. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. Okay, members. Agenda item 7 is the SR 2025-165, the Farm Sustainability Standards Regulations, Northern Ireland 2025. Members, I refer you to pages 68 to 90 of the pack for the SL5, the SR and explanatory memorandum. Members, we received an oral briefing on the 2nd of October and heard that the department intended to make this SR under the negative resolution to replace the current cross-compliance arrangements with the new Farm Sustainability Standards and associated penalty regime from January 1st, 2026. The department has highlighted the following transcription amendments made since the SL1 was laid. Amendment 1, which is the amendment on the Commission delegated regulations. At paragraph 5, article 38, a transcribing error referenced partial deletion of paragraph 2, but should have read paragraph 1. Paragraph 2 should have been omitted. This does not change the policy, but is in line with the removal of the principle of extent from the new penalty regime. 2. Amendment of Commission implementing regulation. Transcribing error has been recorded at paragraph 8. This should have read paragraph 1C and not paragraph 1B. Again, this does not change the policy, but is in line with the removal of the principle of extent from the new penalty regime. The Department has indicated that they can make an official available to provide the Committee with further clarification regarding amendments if required. Members, we have raised a number of queries and considered the Department's response earlier at matters arising regarding the cross-compliance penalties within the last 5 years. At our meeting last week, we also queried why a full human rights assessment was deemed to not be required and what criteria would have been needed to have been met for one to have been completed. Our response from the Department to this query is still awaiting, so it's still outstanding. Members, as you will recall, at our meeting on the 2nd of October, we agreed to consider our support or otherwise for the SR when it has been laid. The end of the statutory period has been calculated as the 25th of November, so we still have time for further consideration if we feel it necessary. Okay? But I'm going to go to put the question on the SR and I'll take your views. That the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2025-165, the Farm Sustainability Standard Regulations, and has no objection to the rules subject to the report of the Examiner of Statute Rules. Any points to make on that? I know you have, Deputy Chair, yes?
Yeah, Chair. I still have an issue with this. We still have an issue with this here in relation to the powers that are enshrined within this here, particularly the power of entry and seizure of computer materials. You know, if we if we look at other situations where the department requires information of farmers, you know, they set a date to provide it by, and they do that there. And if they don't do it, then they look at perhaps a penalty or whatever. But this type of power, you know, is inserted now in this piece of legislation, draft SR, and there hasn't been human rights assessment of this. And from reading it as well, you know, the department had said, whenever I asked this question before when we were in Carrickfergus that day, they said there wasn't human rights assessment, but they also said that an inequality impact assessment was carried out. But according to this, it hasn't actually. So there's conflicting information coming from the department in this. So we just need to get that bottomed out.
Oh, yeah, it's actually on that last point, Declan, in a number of the SRs and S1s that have come through, and I'm not sure about the number at this stage, I've asked the officials to look at this, they repeatedly used the phrase an equality impact assessment wasn't deemed to be necessary, and I would like to know why. there could well be a legitimate test within the department to determine whether it's needed or not, but as you rightly point out, given the powers that are available to the department in an instant like this,
yeah,
it would be useful to know why an equality impact assessment wasn't needed, and as you asked for last week, we still haven't got an answer in regard to if a human rights impact assessment has been carried, given that the powers probably extend further than what the police would have on first call. In that regard, I did say, guys, that the end of the statutory period has been calculated as 25th of November. I mean, I'm in your hands in this regard, and the department have said they would be happy to provide an official. If you're content, it's up to you guys. I can put the question, or we can defer until we get an official. And I would say ask for an official at the next meeting to bottom this one out, because there's some good work in it. I mean, I have to be honest. I like the matrix, for instance. I like the fact that there is a more staged approach to compliance regulations being implicated, and there. But at the same time, some of the powers are far-reaching as well in terms of retrieval of documents. I would suspect computers and that type of stuff. The authorised person can retrieve that, and to me, that police would probably need to go and get more power. I think, I'm not sure, but certainly if an official could give me confidence in that, then it would help. Yeah. Has anybody any objection to that we ask for an official for the next meeting and put the question at that stage once we're in full view of the facts? It'll also give the department time to respond to the question from last week on the human rights assessment. And if you're minded, then the question that I would pose to them in regard to this one and then other SRs, and we'll find out what that is, when they tell us that an equality impact assessment wasn't deemed to be necessary, how they do that, what that test is, how that test is performed to come to the conclusion that an equality impact assessment isn't required. There might well be a good answer. I suspect there is. I suspect it is that they've applied a test and it doesn't meet the bar, but I would like to know what that is. Are members content with that?
And sure, are we confident that we haven't asked that question on a previous occasion?
I'm not aware of it. I don't
Question
know,
on the EQIA.
on every,
Seem to recall a conversation
It,
around it.
it
but-
was asked, and then I think the department had wrote back to us over the last 2 weeks since the Carrickfergus meeting to say that there was a flaw in the information given at that stage. I think their words at the time, and the officials' words were that it was screened and an assessment wasn't required, and then they had come back to say that there was no screen or assessment taken at all. I don't.
so I'd like to know what that screening is, because what I would be uncomfortable with is if someone's carrying the weight of responsibility for making a judgment, I'd like to know there's a process of screening at least, because these are wide-reaching powers and have a good end, because they will help combat, you know, in terms of animal welfare. There's wide ranges, there's good reasons for these. However, for the department to have these powers in this space, they need to be confident that the screening point, whether it's the human rights one or the equality, that's what that mechanism is. And it's because I wouldn't like to think there's a single official carrying the weight of that. Members content with that? Is that clear enough for yourself, Clerk? Is course it's okay? And we'll seek an official to come for the next.
We'll aim for the 6th. I mean, there's a little bit, maybe building a bit congestion wise on the 6th,
I know.
but 13th would still be within our time frame.
6th would be, yeah, 13th would do, but 6th would be better, because
Yes.
I think we'd like to get,
No, absolutely.
be better if we could get this, because the payment regulations will be coming up very quickly on the back of that, so I think we need to ensure that they're not up at the same time as best as possible, because they're linked.
Chair, there's another issue in this.
Okay.
And it's the fact of crop growing. So a farmer that's growing crops can qualify for the farm sustainability payment. But a farmer that decides to grow grass for silage or for hay or for haylage doesn't qualify. What's the difference between growing grass and growing a crop? That it knocks one farmer out, brings another farmer in.
We'll ask the question, and we'll ask that in writing, but we'll also have the official then. Is that okay? But we'll include that. Is that okay? Any others, guys? Just so that, because what I don't want to do is bat this, you know, get to the next meeting and then find that we haven't teased everything out. So if you're aware of it for the 6th, and if the department can supply someone for the 6th, hopefully we will finish this one out. Happy enough?
Just to comment,
This time,
today, and my concerns were articulated at the last meeting with regards to this anyway. But what I do worry about with all of these things is that no matter how often we raise concerns, there's always some sort of response which kind of just placates us. We move on, but there's very often there's no change made. So, I mean, I'm not sure whether that means that maybe the queries that we are raising aren't valid, but there doesn't ever seem to be anything from the department which really shows that, you know, they're listening to the concerns that we have. Because ultimately, why we're raising concerns is because we worry about the practical outworking of these things once legislation then is passed. And undoubtedly, there will be issues, and as there always are. So
Yeah, but there are certainly.
I would like just to get a little more confidence from the department at times, you know, that
Yeah.
perhaps that what we're saying is valid.
Yeah, that's fair. The outworkings of the consequences and possibly mapping of the unintended consequences, which is what we try and do here to the best of our ability. Sometimes it's turned difficult. Okay, members, we will reserve that question until the 6th then, hopefully, and if the department haven't got an official on the 6th, we'll go to the 13th.
And can I be clear? I think we had conversations around this in Carrickfergus Marina one day, and a lot of concerns were addressed. So I don't want us to get into a pattern here of A, asking for clarification on EQA, which may have already been received. I don't want the department thinking we either didn't read or didn't understand the previous answer. So we need to determine whether we're going to keep asking that question or whether the clarification received on or before the 6th of November, likewise for the human rights assessment, will be accepted as a general explanation of the department's screening of EQIA and, if necessary, human rights. And we won't keep asking the same question and get the same answer every time we get an SR that we have a few concerns.
Yeah, to be clear.
Secondly, Chair, sorry, but secondly, I want to be clear if the concerns that are raised are the same as before, that we will be closing it down if we have the same discussion again, rather than waiting for another week to decide whether or not we're going to accept it, and then decide we need more clarifications on the same queries again. I seem to remember quite a comprehensive conversation in Carrickmarina. No issue at all with further clarification, but aware of deadlines and also repetition.
Okay, just to be clear, there's no repetition in this case, John. Just to be quite robust about this, this is something I picked up with the officials in regard to the prevalence of no need for, this isn't specific to this regulation, this is the fact that it pops up, and my concern is I'd like to know what that mechanism is for it to pop up with the regularity, if that's okay, yeah. And then obviously with the question from Declan, it hasn't been answered yet, and I think that poses a significant, for putting the question today, for instance, I think that certainly gives a rationale as to why.
The right standing thing, I don't dispute that.
Okay. Members content? Have you enough there, Jim?
Plenty. Chair.
Excellent, okay. Thank you, members. And when the department lay the SR, it's up to them to do it. Agenda item 8, Departmental Written Briefing, the Northern Ireland Peatland Strategy 2040. Members, as you recall, in June we had a very informative tour of the peatlands at Ancraigan during our visit to Omagh, where we were briefed on the restoration efforts being undertaken there. Very prevalent and relevant that we were talking about that after the wildfire discussion there. Members, I refer you to the briefing paper starting on page 92 of the pack, which sets out the framework for peatland conservation, management and restoration over the next 2 decades. A copy of the strategy starts at page 97 of the pack. Strategy is designed to respond to the twin challenges of biodiversity loss and climate change, and as we are aware, the majority of our peatlands are in a degraded state. The strategy vision is that by 2040 our peatland habitats in Northern Ireland are protected, restored and managed sustainably, recognising the value and benefits they bring. The strategy aims to achieve its goals via 5 strategic environmental outcomes, all of which align with DAERA's core vision of delivering a net zero, nature positive future, supporting sustainable agriculture and thriving rural communities. The SEOs are peatland conservation, restoration and management, policy alignment, capacity building and research, knowledge sharing and communication and access, governance, implementation and funding. Members, in relation to funding, £7.8 million is allocated for peatland restoration through the Environment Fund and Shared Island Fund to 2028. In addition, Peace Plus funding of approximately €40 million is currently awarded for nature projects in Northern Ireland to 2028, which includes a major peatland restoration element of around 12,500 hectares over that same time period. The peatland restoration will be voluntary, but there will be opportunities for landowners to benefit from restoration through farm payments currently under development in the new Sustainable Agriculture Programme or carbon credits. A delivery plan is in development to be published within 4 months, with the establishment of a project management board to oversee implementation of the strategy, which will report on the progress to the Executive and Assembly at least every 3 years. In addition, DAERA will be consulting on restricting retail sales of peat and peat products in early 2026. Members, any comments to make? Content to note? Yep. Okay, members. Agenda item 9 is a departmental written briefing update on ammonia strategy and operational protocol to assess the impacts of air pollution on the natural environment. Members, this item was listed as a written briefing paper, but the team advised on Tuesday that a letter would be issued instead. The committee team sought an explanation from the department and were advised that a DALO letter had been provided instead of a written briefing due to administrative oversight, and that a written briefing would have contained the same content as the DALO letter. So, and it says, please pass on my apologies for the oversight. Members, I now refer you to page 71 to 73 of the table papers for the update on the ammonia strategy and the operational protocol. In relation to the ammonia strategy, this is to be finalised when the Nutrients Action Programme 2026-29 has been agreed. This is because it includes consideration of 2 proposed mandatory measures that form part of the ammonia strategy, which are to be considered by the NAP Stakeholder Task and Finish Group and subject to further 8-week consultation. The 2 measures, which will include an economic impact assessment, are a move to 100% use of the low-emission slurry spreading equipment, otherwise known as LESI, by 2030, and a prohibition on the use of granular urea fertilisers unless they contain a urease inhibitor from January 26. Members, in relation to the operational protocol, a public consultation was held earlier this year on the environmental report for the proposed ammonia strategy and the revised operational protocol as part of the process for strategic environmental assessment. Responses to the consultation on the SEA environmental report are in the final stages of consideration and will inform the SEA statement, the operational protocol and the ammonia strategy. Members, specific issues regarding the protocol raised in response to the SEA consultation, which include concerns raised regarding double counting of emissions and replacement buildings, are being considered by officials. The Department is also working on the development of a pilot programme of site-specific actions to reduce ammonia emissions around designated sites. Members, any comments on that? No. Okay. Agenda item 10, members, is correspondence. Refer you to page 146 of the pack to the invitation on behalf of Enva Limited for the committee to receive a briefing and tour of its new fridge recycling facility in Toonbridge. We considered an invitation from Enva at our meeting on the 11th of September, and as agreed, we are added it to our forward work programme. If you have any comments, you can tend to note. Sure, we'll be looking at the forward work programme in a few weeks' time to bottom it out a bit better. I refer you to page 7 of the table of papers to the correspondence from the clerk of the Committee for Infrastructure dated 21st of October regarding water, sustainable drainage and flood management bill. Members, I would also refer you to the table of papers starting on page 8 for a copy of the bill as introduced, the explanatory memorandum and the bill paper produced by Race. The committee seeks our views on the bill, including a nil response by the 13th of November. So if the members will bear with me, I'll provide the following for the context of the committee. So clause 2 of the bill introduces a statutory enabling power for the Department for Infrastructure to promote the use of sustainable drainage systems, otherwise known as SUDs, as the preferred method for managing surface water in new developments. Sustainable drainage systems are a suite of water management practices designed to replicate natural drainage processes in developed environments. Their primary function is to manage surface water runoff by controlling flow rates, improving water quality and enhancing biodiversity and amenity. Clause 2 will not make SUDs mandatory, but it does create the framework that could lead to their mandatory use in the future. Given that the weather at the start of the week, guys, and what happened in Newcastle and around Tullybrannigan and stuff, these are the type of moments, I suppose, that bring greater clarity and focus to the value of these pieces of work. So, members, have you any comments, or members agreed that the committee provides a nil response, or shall we perhaps reconsider before the deadline? I wouldn't mind looking at it again, guys. I don't want to bog us down, but I think it's a wee bit like the wildfires. Unfortunately, people don't talk about them unless they're happening, and then they're a blinking disaster. And similarly with flooding, you know, when the weather's okay, you know, we can sort of forget about it. But would you mind if we come back to that at the next session, just briefly, and if you could have a look at it when you're off, just to see if there's anything that we want to add to it. It's not going to be mandatory, and I understand that, but at the same time, we all talk a lot about the blockages in planning, but we still have to help in terms of the solutions. And this would be a developer-led solution, I would suspect. Okay, so members, happy enough that we return to that even briefly?
Enough, Chair, but it'd be an idea to maybe revisit if there are any raised papers already available. I'm not suggesting the Commission a new piece of work on the impacts of climate on these matters as well from our committee's environmental remit. Just so we can marry the two up. I have no doubt there are some links there. And
no doubt, yeah. It's
reflect that in our reply.
Yeah, okay.
If we do reply.
Yeah, okay.
Apologies, Chair.
So, looking at other papers from Race, particularly in and around the climate and environment, either the cause or impact in regard to floodwater,
flooding in particular,
yeah.
Rising sea levels, which could therefore cause floods, etc.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair.
In the Race paper, there is stuff. So in the information pack, not the Race paper, in the information pack for the motion that I had at the start of the week in regard to storm preparedness, actually there was some really good stuff about global warming and sea temperatures and water temperatures, just in terms of the precipitation, what that leads to, and the changes in weather patterns. So it is pertinent.
Okay.
Would you be prepared to share that, Chair?
Yes, I'll grab that, yeah, I will, certainly, no problem. Okay, agenda item 11 is the forward work programme, members. I refer you to page 148 to 151 of the pack for the draft forward work programme. Are you content that it's published?
Yep.
Agenda item 12, any other business, members?
Nope.
Okay, agenda item 13, date, time and place of the next meeting. Next meeting will be on Thursday the 6th of November 2025 at 10 AM in room 21. The meeting is now adjourned.